All right, we're on air. Happy Thursday, February 18th, day before my birthday. Woohoo. We are going to do a quick rundown of all of the stuff in our agenda as usual. Starting with general announcements, if you want to make a donation to Backdrop CMS, we'll send you a t-shirt and a hoodie. Upcoming events is Sand Camp. We'll have a bunch there in person, so if you're going to be in San Diego and you really want a hoodie and you want to try it on first, that's totally fine. You can come try it on there. So don't pay online, pay in person. If you want a free PHP Storm license, those are available to all of Backdrop's Contrib developers. All you need to do is join the Backdrop Contrib group, and we can help you through that process if you want. You either need to have ported a module theme or layout or want to co-maintain one, and we can get you set up there. One important thing to note, you should make your membership to that group public. This is something that Mike noticed, I think, in this last week, is that a lot of people, including myself, had not set their membership for that group to public. And if you can't see that you're public, then the PHP Storm people can't verify that you're allowed to have a license, so that's kind of one thing if you want the license. And another thing is just it kind of doesn't look like there's as many people involved as there actually are. It is tricky to find that setting. It took me a couple of minutes. But if you go to the Backdrop Contrib group and look at the settings, there's a list of all of the contributors, and it'll say next to your name whether your status is public or not. I also don't think anyone else has the ability to change your visibility setting. I was looking at that today, and it looks like everyone is only allowed to change their own. So if you're okay with contributing to Backdrop being public, then you should change that setting, and it'll definitely help for PHP Storm licenses. So, related. A couple of new updates from the PMC this week. You guys remember a couple of weeks ago we announced that we added Mike McCaffrey as a new member. Last week we mentioned that we were interested in adding a bunch of other new members too, but we wanted to kind of clearly outline what our constituents should be and make sure that we have a person from each group involved in the PMC, and that'll make sure that we don't make any decisions for the entire project that are out of line with the goals of that particular group. It'll help us kind of stay on track. So I just wanted to go over these now. We're looking for somebody who is owner or representative of a web development company. So it doesn't have to be a huge company, but having more than one developer would be good, just so that we know what it's like as a company that builds websites for people, what kind of problems are you facing, what kind of solutions are you looking for, and is Backdrop meeting those needs? So it would be good to have that voice in the mix. We're also looking to have someone who is not a coder, so someone who's a site builder or an editor or somebody who administers sites but doesn't actually write any code. Would be really great to have as well, to make sure that we have a voice of somebody who maybe doesn't know what's going on under the hood and experiences the software from the surface to know if the decisions we're making are affecting them in ways that are positive and not negative. And then we also want to have someone who is an expert on the front end, so someone who's really in tune with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, what's going on with the modern web versus, you know, what the majority of people are doing, kind of has a good feel of what front-enders want versus what's realistic for people owning websites. Getting that kind of feedback on the PMC would also be really good. So, Mike, I think you also mentioned it would be good to have somebody who's super in tune with Contrib, like somebody who relies heavily on contributed modules. I wasn't really sure how to list that as a constituent, because there's a lot of people that could just be like Contrib users, but we'll figure out terminology. But people that are, you know, very good at working with contributed modules and understand how Contrib stuff works with core APIs would be great to have one of those people in there as well. So that's kind of what we're looking
basically,
for.
I think we need...
You go ahead.
I was going to say, basically, I think we need someone basically who's familiar with a lot of the contributed modules, who can make sure that any changes that we make to core don't break things sort of on the contributed side, and that we aren't... Yeah, because I think the three of us are like pretty much like very core focused, and maybe if someone is more contrib focused, they could make sure that we don't make any changes that a bunch of core people might get upset about, or contrib people might get upset about.
Okay. Contrib expert. Yeah, that's good. I don't. Yeah, we'll figure out the exact terminology, but I think that all sounds very good. So we are going to be looking for people who are interested in filling these roles in the PMC. We have kind of a couple people in mind for some of them, and we'll reach out to you and see if you're interested. But if your name isn't on our shortlist and there is something that you really want to be involved in, definitely let us know as well, especially the kind of site owner or website builder company owner role. That's not something that someone's been super involved in core or maybe even watching these videos is going to be on our radar. But if we have people who are super interested in what Backdrop is doing but haven't contributed yet because they don't write code but wants to be involved in some way, it's a good place to kind of pop your head in the door. So definitely let us know if you're interested in any of those roles, and we'll try and figure out a process for getting people in and managing that as well. So we are thinking about expanding. This is where we're going. We haven't quite figured out how to do it yet, but we'll get there. Nate, let's turn over to you for community growth.
Okay. Wow, lots of stuff happening this past week. Let's see, we have 213 total projects for Backdrop CMS in the Backdrop Contrib GitHub group. That's 5 new modules since last meeting, including a couple of ones that are super handy, and I'm really happy to see them in our Contrib repository. Views send module was ported. Views send lets you send emails to emails within a views listing, like a bulk operation. Node clone, of course, which lets you copy existing nodes into new copies. Search 404, which turns your 404 page into a search results page. And then 2 JS library-related modules, Wow.js, Such Impress, and Animate CSS, which are actually, the Wow.js module is new just for Backdrop, and the Animate CSS is a port from Drupal 7. So, so awesome to see all of those modules being ported. Andy, I know you're responsible for several of those, so thanks again. And also Graham for doing views sends. It's so great to see so many new modules being available for Backdrop. Let's see, on backdropcms.org, there are 144 projects that have official releases, which differs from the ones on GitHub, because GitHub is kind of like all modules that are in development, whether they're ready or not. And once they're ready, we make an official release on GitHub, and then it synchronizes over to backdropcms.org. And 8 new modules have been, or 8 modules have had releases, their first release since last meeting. Again, super awesome to see all of these new modules for Backdrop. There also have been 10 new releases on backdropcms.org, which means those 8 that got their first releases plus 2 modules that got new updated versions posted to backdropcms.org, which is great to see ongoing maintenance of those modules as well. And in the Contrib applications, I couldn't actually discern the new members from the list, but we have 3 new members since last week, moving up from 45 Contrib authors to 48. Welcome, new people. Yay, super excited to have you. And there are 8 open applications for the Contrib group, all of which are just waiting for feedback from the original applicants. So we've been keeping on top of those applications pretty effectively, which is great. If you'd like to join the Backdrop Contrib group, you can do so by visiting github.com/backdrop-ops/contrib. And that's where we have our issue queue for people that are interested in moving Backdrop modules or themes into the Backdrop Contrib group on GitHub. Let's see, and over on backdropcms.org, we have 105 total user accounts. 8 new users have signed up since last meeting. All in all, wow, a pretty impressive week as far as community growth goes. Lots of new modules, lots of new contributors. It's really awesome to see so much activity. Let's see. So next item on the agenda is infrastructure. We talk about the things that are around the Backdrop project every week that isn't the software itself. And most of those things are related to backdropcms.org and tools around using Backdrop. So this one item we've been talking about for a long time. We've got a lot of things that are in needs review but haven't been deployed yet, and that's around how project module and update module interact with each other. We have update module on all of the Backdrop sites that are out there. If you have update module turned on, it checks into backdropcms.org to check for new versions of modules and Backdrop itself. And we are collecting data about what modules are installed on all of the sites that are out there, but we haven't started displaying or calculating those numbers on backdropcms.org yet. That PR has been ready for a long time, but we still haven't deployed it because we have some cleaning up to do. That Travis CI tests right now are also in our raw data, and we'd like to get that information out. Jen filed a pull request to make it so that Travis will stop checking in into Backdrop core to make it so that test runners won't actually be pinging backdropcms.org all the time. So step one is to merge that. Step two is to remove all of the current Travis CI IP addresses from our raw data on the server. And then step three is to actually enable the analytics like calculation script. We have a pull request for it, but it's not deployed to backdropcms.org yet. Once those things are in place, we'd like to expand out what kind of data we collect from Backdrop CMS sites that are out there, including things like certain features that are enabled on their sites or what themes they're using or theme settings they're using, if they're using color schemes or things like that, so that we can make more decisions based on what features are actually being used on sites based on what the usage data is reporting. Let's see. So not a lot of updates on those things, but still kind of slow and steady progress. Let's see, Drush for Backdrop. We have a working extension for Drush that makes it so that Drush functions on Backdrop websites. You plop it into your .drush directory or into your Drush installation, and it makes it so that Drush can identify a Backdrop site and do certain commands, a subset of the available commands at least. But we're always adding more commands, and I think, Jeff, sorry I didn't check in with you before the meeting, but could you give an update on Drush since you've been working on expanding it recently?
Sure. Wes asked for ULI last week, and we fired that up, and he tested it, and we merged it in. So that's great, one more command. And actually just a few minutes ago, someone filed a PR against Drush DL. I guess with wget, some versions don't have show progress, so it was breaking on his site, so he filed a PR to remove that, which I think is good for wider coverage. I'll take a look and see if we can conditionally include it or something like that. But that's good. Go ahead.
Sorry, I haven't filed it. I haven't filed it yet, but I actually, when I installed the Drush extension for Backdrop, it actually started breaking commands with Drupal. Suddenly it's starting to, there's a lot of wget errors when downloading regular Drupal modules and Drupal installations. I'm not sure how that's possible, but as soon as I removed the extension, suddenly the errors all went away.
Yeah, we have an issue for that. Let's see, it is, here we go, issue 14 in the Drush issue queue. We haven't figured this one out yet, like what the deal is with it. But for some reason, the Drush extension for Backdrop is somehow affecting Drupal 7 installations, which is not friendly. But yeah, we have some ideas about that. For now, what Jeff and others have been doing is they set up an aliased version of Drush that one that has the backdrop extension and one that doesn't. Obviously not ideal, but we're not actually sure if it's a Drush bug or if it's a backdrop implementation bug, but for some reason, like, Drush won't stop loading the backdrop implementation even when it shouldn't, which is strange. So yeah, we're working on it. Let's see. So another thing we'd like to do, we've got an issue here that once we get that issue resolved, as well as Drush UpDB working, although Jeff, you said Drush UpDB is now working for running update.php scripts, is that right? Yeah, okay. We'd like to reach out to the guys at Pantheon and make it so that Pantheon's integration with Backdrop, there's a little checkbox for like run update.php after a new version of Backdrop comes out, and you deploy that to Pantheon. But that checkbox has never worked. So once we have the Drush integration fixed, we want to get the Pantheon people to update their Drush to load the Drush extension for Backdrop and make it so that checkbox can actually work again, which would be great. Let's see. Okay, GitHub automation. On github.com, we've got a bunch of items that we would like to do to automate some of our processes. Contrib group applications, we'd like to have an automated code review functionality. Syncing between pull requests and issues would also be really great in between our issue repository and our code repository. We should have issue numbers for these things as well, but they're not in the agenda. We can get that updated rather than me needing to find the link every meeting. But there's a whole tag for things that we'd like to automate. It's the GitHub automation tag that is in the backdropcms.org issue queue. So if you're familiar with GitHub APIs and you want to do some integration, we can get you access to backdropcms.org's continuous integration server, and we can write any kind of integration we need to make it so that GitHub and backdropcms.org have further integration with each other to make it so that we can speed up some of our processes. All right, backdropcms.org. Jen, do you want to take it over?
I'll take it over unmuted. How's that? All right. So we recently have allowed people to be able to sign up and log in to backdropcms.org. But somebody did point out recently that we didn't put a sign up or a login link anywhere on the website. So that's like my highest priority item for today, is to get that added. And then we'd also like to be able to set up some kind of single sign-on with GitHub, so that if you already have a GitHub account, you don't need to create an account on Backdrop. You can just click the button and log in. And then if you want to add your profile information, you can, but some of it we should be able to pull over directly from GitHub, like your GitHub username. But that isn't ready yet. That's kind of next on our list. We also are planning on adding a showcase for websites that are built with Backdrop, which will help those of us who are building sites with Backdrop convince people that we should build sites with Backdrop. And we're going to add a service and contractor listing so that people who want to build sites with Backdrop can find people to build them sites with Backdrop. We're also going to add an event calendar so that anyone who has an upcoming event that they're interested in having people either speak about Backdrop or people come to learn about Backdrop, we'll be able to list that on an events calendar. And then we also want to do a jobs board so that if anyone's trying to specifically hire Backdrop developers, we can get listings up for that as well. We do have a bunch of existing things that need improvements, like our news page, our news, I don't know if we're going to call it a blog page, whatever section is where we're putting our blog posts and announcements and videos and Twitters and whatever needs a design review, so we're working on that. We also have our Find Modules, Themes, and Layouts pages. There's more design work that we have that we've not implemented yet because we're stuck on some development work, think that's becoming more urgent since we have more and more modules, themes, and layouts being ported to Backdrop. So I would love to spend some time getting that going, in particular getting the themes images to display. And there is some related core work to that as well, where we're thinking about adding the ability to have more than one screenshot of a theme or a module or a layout. And so I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work in terms of the short term. We'll probably just build the one. But I would love to be able to get like multiple screenshots. I think that would be more useful for modules where you have different functionality, and for themes that have support for more than one layout or you want to show more than one page. So all that's tied in. I think it's important. I think that's high on our priority list. Let's see, moving into news and announcements. Official blog schedule at 1:58. We got a little off track recently because the way that the news posting works is that right now the only people that have access to publish stuff are editors on the site, and our regular bloggers don't. So we're looking at some alternatives for that. There is also a core issue about we should be able to set the date to the future, and then the content will publish at that date in the future. It would be great if we could get that in so that we can benefit from it ourselves. There's also some talk about just letting anyone on backdropcms.org be able to write a blog post and have it appear somewhere else, like, for example, on their user page. And then we could look at the blog posts that are being created and promote them to the front page as necessary. I'm a little hesitant on that just because I don't want people to start using backdropcms.org as their own blog. But I don't really know why I have that feeling. Like, maybe it would be good if people use backdropcms.org as their own blog. It's just not been in my mind as something that we would support. But it could be. It would definitely be a good test case of the kinds of things people want to do on blogs and if we can actually support that or not. But it's a good idea. I think we should continue talking about it and decide if that's what we want to do. I do also like the idea of having people write their own, whatever content they want. Oh, I just learned how to do this. Here's a post about it. Since we don't have anywhere for them to do that yet. So we'll see. But the next blog post is supposed to be tomorrow. Nate's writing one on PHP 7 support. Maybe? Maybe not?
Yeah. It's benchmarks are hard, like for real benchmarks. But yeah, working on it. I don't know if that's going to be tomorrow, but soon.
Okay, so we did get our post from last Friday up. I think it was this Monday or something. So we have a recent post up there now. Nate, if you're not going to get that one done by tomorrow, if anyone else has something they want to blog about tomorrow, we can throw that up, or we can just push yours to next week. There is some other stuff we should probably be working on in marketing anyway. Like, we need to send a newsletter. We have a webinar coming up we should promote. We have a training coming up we should promote. We haven't sent a newsletter to our people about 1.3 coming out. There's a lot of stuff I think we should be working on that isn't the blog, so if that needs to wait a week, I think that'll be fine. Other things, let's see, we have a webinar February 24th, which I just mentioned, and we've been getting some excellent promotion from the folks who are doing that webinar, which is, I think it's pronounced Srijan Technologies. They're doing a great job at promoting that, so I'm going to do some additional promotion of that in our newsletter, etc. And that'll be a deep dive into layouts. It'll be a kind of a high-level overview of like what is Backdrop, maybe a couple, 10, 15 minutes on that, and then a deep dive into layouts, because layouts is the one thing that's significantly different between Backdrop and Drupal. And this is primarily to a Drupal target audience, but I think it'll be really interesting, right on the heels of DrupalCon Asia. Should be fun. Okay, we've got a whole bunch of other marketing-related tasks in the backdropcms.org issue queue. There's a tag there for audience marketing. If there's anyone who has any particular affinity for marketing, maybe doesn't contribute in any other way, there are a bunch of low-hanging fruit tasks there that just be a couple of minutes that we could definitely use help with. All right, let's move on to Backdrop CMS, the project itself. Version 1.3.3 is our next scheduled release. We have a bunch of issues from the latest version of Drupal 7.4.2, that I think almost all of them have pull requests. Last time I looked at it, there was only one left, which was pretty tricky. It was upgrading some, I don't remember exactly, it was like upgrading an external function that Drupal had copied from something else to the latest version of that function and also copied from something else. So the pull request, or the patch in Drupal was super messy. And so trying to get that cleaned up for Backdrop was also kind of a pain. But I think everything else is a pull request, mostly thanks to Jeff. So thanks for putting all that work in there. That was fantastic. And I think, I don't know how many pull requests are in the queue for review for that, but there's a huge chunk of them that are probably ready, because they're not all terribly complicated. I'm sure there's a handful of them that probably need to be re-rolled or worked on, cool. Make tests not fail, whatever. Pair, yeah, the pair library, that's what it was. Thanks, Jeff.
Right. Yeah.
There are also a couple of little bugs that emerged from 1.3.0. None of them are super high priority, but anything that has popped up as a bug has been tagged for 1.3 if it's easy to fix. If not, it'll go into 1.3.4 instead of 1.3.3, but as needed, we'll fix bugs as they come up. Nothing that is so broken that we need to issue a release urgently. So it's on our agenda for the next bug fix release. The next minor release, 1.4.0, is scheduled for May 15th, which is also Wes's wedding day. It's very exciting. And high on our list there to fix some user experience issues with the rich text editor. These are things that didn't get into 1.3 that anyone trying to write blogs on Backdrop or create content on Backdrop is running into pretty often. I would love to see those get fixed on or before 1.4 coming out. We also have some big chunks of code that we'd like to get into 1.4, including references module, which will be a slight rewrite from references module in Contrib. I think there's work going on that already. The issue number is 1301. There's also redirect module, which is same thing, where we'll take as much as we can from Contrib and see if it's clean enough to go into core as is or needs a little rewrite on it. And that issue is 905. I think that has a pull request that's ready for review, if anyone wants to work on that today. And then we have the two doozies, creating a new front-end theme and adding a set of layouts to make Backdrop more versatile out of the box. Both of those are going to require some kind of careful thought about how to get from current versions Backdrop to an upgraded version that contains the new themes and layouts. We're going to need to think about how the two fit together in terms of organizing our CSS, if we want to use some kind of a framework, if we want to make our own framework, how all that stuff will fit together. Might end up being a little complicated, but we do have some good ideas based on Contrib for both Drupal and Backdrop, and I know Wes has been doing a bunch of work on a nice, clean design for the new front-end theme, which at last we saw was looking fantastic. So I don't know if you want to give us an update on that, Wes, or if you just want to say, yes, I'm working on it.
Sure, yeah. I conned a coworker that it's a designer to give me feedback, Marissa Epstein, and she toured a new one, but that was good. So got me thinking a lot about how I could improve this. But I think for now, since she didn't have any major complaints about the wireframe, I think I'm just gonna build it just to like have something built, and then think about the design. She said she might be able to find some time to help me, work out some visual ideas. So I think she'd probably be a lot better at it than I am, because I lost my patience for graphic design. So yeah, that's I'm about to upload a new version I'm working on right now. It's not that different. It's pretty similar, but has some nice touches. So and I got for anyone who either wants to try to design it themselves and wants to use mine as a base, or anyone who wants to try to code it themselves and wants to use my code as a base, which doesn't exist yet. I'm going to make that stuff available so people can just riff on what I have or like make something completely different. It's all up to you. So, ta-da.
Yay, that's fantastic. Thanks so much. All right, so we have milestones for both 1.3.3 and 1.4.0 in the GitHub queue. So if you want to see what is on the to-do list for those two issues, you can go ahead and check out those milestones. All right, we also have a bunch of other issues that are always kind of in our mind in terms of improving related to both user experience and developer experience. Two major ones for user experience that we would love to get into 1.4 if possible are the project browser, which we had slated for 1.3 but needs a little needs to be integrated more carefully with the rest of Backdrop. Separated out from the update module, but then integrated into like the add a module page. So removed in some places and added in others. There's a little cleanup on the code there. And then field UI, which I know Wes has also done a ton of work on. We know it's messy. It is messy, but it is what people know. So we're trying to kind of rethink that problem space and say, how can we make it less messy, more intuitive, but still not veer too far from the tool that people know how to use today. So that's also, there's a bunch of mock-ups in that issue as well. That's issue number 799. We'd love to get more feedback and progress on that if anyone is particularly passionate about field UI and or project browser. All right, so when do we do all this work? Well, we like to do it on Thursdays, often right after this phone call. We hang out in the GitHub issue queues. We hang out in IRC if you guys like IRC. We've also started using Gitter, which is a chat medium for anyone who's on GitHub. I actually like that a little bit better than IRC. There's lower barriers to entry, but since most of our Drupal friends are on IRC, we're also still on IRC for the time being. We have Reddit that if you aren't into IRC or Gitter or GitHub, you can chat on Reddit, and we are talking about other ways to let people communicate with each other, perhaps by building something on backdropcms.org. Nate just asked if Jeff wanted to give an update on redirect module. It's okay if you want to like give an update on redirect module in the issue queue, but
yeah, I just have to go through. Nate made some a good review of it, and I just have to go through his suggestions. And we're changing course. I was integrating with Path. We're going to make it a standalone module since it seems obvious that that's what should be the case due to the hooks in there and things. So thanks, Nate.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, it looks really good though. Like I mean, I know it's mostly just a port of the contrib version of the module, but there's adaptations and things in there to make it appropriate for core, and it's a great start. So that's great to see that coming along. I know other than that, like we've also got references, and I'm not sure if there's been any update on that either. I know Mike's been taking a stab at it, but I'm not sure that it's moved forward yet.
No, it hasn't. But I did find a house to live in Portland, so at least that's taken care of this past week.
Yeah, I know how that can go.
So now that that's done, maybe I'll have some time to work on it this week.
Okay, excellent.
Another thing we should maybe talk about too is the entity conversion, because we have had the same conversation 2 or 3 times recently where we took the parts of Entity that weren't completed in Drupal 7 and completed them in Backdrop, but it is not as complete as the Entity API module was for Drupal 7 Contrib. And we had this talk with Ryan Sarama, because he has Drupal Commerce uses entities really heavily, about how there are parts of the Entity API that aren't in Backdrop and how to get around that. And then Mike, I know you ran into that recently too, when you were working on converting other modules that use entities heavily. I'm not sure like what our game plan is for all of the stuff in Entity API that's not in core, if we want to have an entity API contrib module solution, or if we want to try and move the missing pieces into core, or if we want to set some guidelines around like what we want in core and what we don't. And then that way it'll be really clear to be like, okay, this, if anyone does need an entity metadata wrapper, they need the entity API contrib module. But if anybody wants like entity load all info or whatever, that should be in core. Like there might be like a clear delineation of stuff we want in core and stuff we don't. And I don't know, Nate, if you have any thoughts on how to deal with that. But the more contrib modules that do crazy stuff with entities, the more we're going to have to kind of figure out what we want Backdrop to do with entities and what we don't.
Well, I was thinking about it since I was working on this, and I feel like there's a lot of the entity code that just like does the stuff with entities and makes them work. But then there's also sort of a lot of like the metadata wrappers and things like that, or for developers who want to have more tools to use with entities and sort of the object-oriented land. So moving as much of the sort of object-oriented programmer preference stuff to a contrib module and trying to make sure that the core of what entities needs to be, even if that's not installed, is there, is probably sort of a good, it's complicated. Like, I mean, the whole system is very complicated, and it's kind of Drupal meeting the rest of the object-oriented world, like, you know, in some slow, weird collision. So it's like, you know, hard to tell exactly where one stops and one ends, but it's, yeah.
Yeah, Ryan Zarama's take was the same, that for his commerce platform for Backdrop, he's calling Backshop, that it needed only the like critical parts of the API, and like the entity wrappers in particular is all just convenience methods. Like it's all just shortcuts basically. And he came to the same conclusion that the shortcuts and those wrappers are unnecessary. They're really just kind of convenience. Obviously, I'm repeating myself, but it's really not crucial for core or for his purposes, and I doubt it will be for our references port either. That we can, if we need to, we can call entity load and load an entity off of its ID. Like that's not hard, rather than chaining them together to automatically load them. So that's about where we're going to be. But he had a bunch of other changes that were just like things that are missing out of the entity API, that we should get those parts into core. Things like I'm trying to remember what.
There was like a get all entity info function.
Yeah, there were just a couple of things that right now are a hassle to generate, and they should be functions that are in core.
Okay, so anytime anyone's working on any module that needs one of those little handy developer assistance, make it less hassle thing, we should make a core issue against Backdrop and tag it with DX, and we'll see whenever we can get that in, we can get it in. But anyone who wants anything crazy like an entity metadata wrapper, that would need to live in like Backdrop's contrib version of entity API. Right? Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, also another thing too is that when we were talking to Ryan about like how to think about solving problems for Backdrop, it seemed like the Drupal 7 straight port for a lot of these bigger projects for something like commerce is not really the right solution, because it would be best to kind of take Backdrop's philosophy and create a contrib project with that in mind. So rather than just porting Drupal Commerce to Backdrop, which maybe isn't the right solution, he's kind of rethinking about like what would Drupal Commerce look like if it was written with Backdrop's principles in mind. And I think the more people tend to do that, the less we're going to need an entity API for Backdrop, because people will say like, oh, you know, these object-oriented wrappers are there for convenience, but maybe like in a Backdrop world we do different things for convenience, or we have fewer layers of abstraction and just call these things directly. And we'll just kind of see what contrib world starts to look like for Backdrop, where we are kind of taking everything into account too. So so far I know we've been doing a lot of straight porting just because we need to get things done, but it would be kind of fun to start kind of saying, like, what does this look like for Backdrop, and would it be different from what it looks like for Drupal? That goes in terms of what the code looks like, as well as like what the user interface looks like. We were also talking about how a commerce package for Backdrop might be a single module rather than a suite of like 50 modules or however many are in commerce, where you can pick and choose which ones you want on and off. I'm kind of facing that same thing for some of these smaller contrib projects that usually provide 2 or 3 contrib modules, where it's like, why don't we just package that together and make it one? Like, you have one Flex Slider module rather than a Flex Slider fields and a Flex Slider views. So just trying to kind of think about, like, what does that module look like in a Backdrop world rather than in a Drupal world? I think it's going to be a fun exercise for lots of us going forward. Or maybe not. I like to think it's going to be fun. Okay, well, is there anything else anyone wants to talk about?
Are you guys still considering like a view slideshow for core for perhaps like the new theme? I think part of Wes's mock-up is a slideshow.
I would love to have some kind of like full width image element in core. I'm not sure. I mean, and I would love to see if we can get that into 1.4 as part of our new like homepage layout. I think that would be fantastic. Then I think it would be easy to change that in the future to say like it's either a full image or it's a slider. I don't know how the JavaScript part would work, like if we want to let people choose what JavaScript library is driving that slider or not. I don't know, Nate, if you have thoughts on that.
Well, if we had a slider, we would need to ship with some core library, and I think that we would I was suggesting that we do the same thing for menu dropdowns, that we ship with some option in core, and that's the only option that's available. And then, yeah, if you have another library, then a select list becomes available for you to choose your library, but otherwise it's hidden, sort of thing. But yeah, I don't. It's a big issue.
It gets messy pretty quick.
It also gets us into the like URL-less entity type, like whatever that would be, to be items within the slideshow, because this probably wouldn't be nodes. So yeah, it's definitely interesting, but I think for the next version, we'll probably start with just an image. Yeah. Start with an image in the new theme, like some kind of banner, and then slideshows will be later.
Yeah, I think that is a good idea to try and do the slideshow feature the same time we add the pageless nodes feature, because that would be a good way to give people a working example of pageless nodes.
Question from Doug Van. Is anybody planning on going to Texas camp April 1 and 2?
No, I didn't even have it on my calendar.
Yeah, it's maybe a secret because I found it by mistake. But I have a couple things I can do in that area, so I'm thinking about piggybacking on that. I didn't expect anybody was going, but I'll do what I can to get some Backdrop in there as well if the opportunity arises, which I think it will. Secondly, I did retweet the Drupal Easy podcast link from a couple hours ago with mentioning Backdrop, and George DeMette responded saying, I have not listened to the podcast yet, but I'd love to see a showcase of sites running Backdrop. So I know that's on our agenda, but is there anything informal we could do in the short term?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would love to set up something informal. Anyone have any ideas? Like, should we just put a list somewhere and let people like a GitHub issue or something, where it's like anyone who's done a site just throw a link that?
Like a blog post on the website with a couple of ones that we know about, and encourage other people to link to it in the comments. Oh wait, do we have comments?
We don't have comments yet.
Well,
we can figure that out though.
We can write a post and then tell people to tweet us if they have additions, and we can add them.
Yeah. That might be a good blog post for tomorrow. Anyone want to write it?
Not all at once.
Who's going to aggregate the information? We do a shout out, right? We have to crowdsource this. Where are all the websites? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
well, I can probably write like a one-paragraph post that's like, hey, we wanted to, establish a list of sites that are built with Backdrop. Anyone who has one, send one. And I think as long as we can get like 5 for the initial post, that's probably enough. And then we can say, please, like, tweet or comment or whatever, send us more information about sites you've built, and then that'll be like a good, interim solution until we can get an actual showcase up.
Excellent.
Okay. Good idea. All right, so you mentioned Texas Camp. It wasn't on my list. I didn't know about it. Definitely, Doug, let us know if you get a session in there about Backdrop or not. On the calendar, we do have, not this weekend, but next weekend, Sand Camp with the first full day Backdrop training. Then March 4th through 5th, we have Drupal Camp Utah with Lullabut's Jared Bittner doing a session on Backdrop. Mid Camp in Chicago is March 19th through 22nd. I know we have a lot of people who are going. Jim Birch, Andy, Doug Van, Nate and I have been guilt-tripped into thinking about going. We've not actually made any decisions yet. That might be a great place to do the said showcase of sites built with Backdrop if anyone's looking for a session idea. I know, I think, Wes, you might have already submitted one there. Texas Camp, April 1st and 2nd, that Doug just mentioned. Drupal Camp Guadalajara, April 7th through 9th, have reached out to us today to try and get us involved. If anyone wants to go to Mexico, that's probably going to be really fun. DrupalCon New Orleans, May 9th through 13th. The last few weeks we talked about maybe trying to submit a session again. I think we have a couple of angles. If it's not like, hey, Drupal people, this is Backdrop, if it was something like how to collaborate across different open source projects or something that was more warm and fuzzy and less let us tell you about the dark side, I think that might have a shot of getting in. I also think if it included people other than myself and Nate, that might be more interesting. So if it was like coming from the more of the community and less of us, I think that would probably also do well. So I don't know who's planning on going to DrupalCon New Orleans, but we definitely should brainstorm ideas about what a session might look like that might get accepted. Might not, but could be a fun exercise anyway. CiviCon, which is coming up May, June. I'm not sure if they have a date yet. We've been asked to go and talk about Backdrop in CiviCRM, so that would be fun. Twin Cities Drupal Camp, June 20th through 23rd. PHP Summit, Mexico City, September 24th. Lots of stuff coming up on the calendar. It is Drupal camp season. Everybody's starting to get organized. So definitely if you guys have other camps or conferences you're going to be attending where people want to hear about Backdrop or you want to talk about Backdrop, let us know. We'll throw it on the Google Calendar, and then hopefully very soon people will be able to add their own events onto backdropcms.org. Okay, anything else anyone wants to add? Nope. Okay, well then let's break, go back to the issue queue, do a lot of work. If anyone needs books on Drupal or books on Backdrop, you can check with Apress. They have a Migrating from Drupal to Backdrop book that's out now, and they will have a beginning Backdrop book that hits shelves second quarter 2016. Otherwise, thank you guys all for coming to the meeting and watching and doing all of the fantastic things that you guys do for Backdrop. We'll see you next week.
Yay. Thanks, everybody.